The war had turned the skies of Zorath Prime into a storm of fire. Lightning cracked between clouds, but it was not from nature. It came from plasma cannons and laser bursts. High above the black and red landscape, the Terran defense fleet fought against the Zorathian armada. Ships twisted and spun like angry birds of prey, each trying to destroy the other. Lieutenant Elias Vance gripped the controls of his fighter. His ship shook violently as enemy fire struck the shields. The alarms screamed in his ears. "Come on, hold together," he muttered, pulling hard to the left. Through the canopy, he could see the green glow of Zorathian weapons chasing him. A blast hit his right wing. The control panel sparked, filling the cockpit with smoke. His fighter spun out of formation. The ground below rushed closer and closer. "Vance, eject!" shouted his commander through the comms. But Elias's voice was calm. "Negative, I can still land this." The engines groaned, the hull rattled, and the fighter tore through the thick clouds. The surface of Zorath Prime came into view, towering crystal spires, wide black rivers, and a huge alien city made of shining metal and stone. His damaged fighter clipped the edge of a building before smashing into a narrow street. Metal screamed against stone. The cockpit glass shattered. The ship slid to a stop in the shadow of a tall tower. Elias's head rang. He unstrapped himself. Quickly, knowing Zorathian soldiers would soon arrive. Smoke hissed from the wreck. The street was empty, the air thick with the smell of burned metal. Then, he heard it. A small voice, not a soldier's shout. It was a cry. He turned and saw a girl, no older than 12 by human guess, crouched beside a fallen market stall. Her skin had the deep blue tone of the Zorathians, and her large golden eyes were wide with fear. Above her, parts of a shattered building creaked dangerously, ready to fall. Elias froze. This was the enemy. She was Zorathian. But as another blast shook the city, a large metal beam shifted loose from above. It was going to fall, right where she stood. Without thinking, Elias ran. He threw himself over the girl, pushing her to the ground as the beam crashed beside them with a heavy clang. Dust exploded into the air. The girl clung to him, trembling. He could feel her small frame shaking through his flight suit. "You're okay," he said, keeping his voice calm even though he was out of breath. She looked up at him, confused, maybe shocked that a human soldier had helped her. Suddenly, deep voices shouted from down the street. Zorathian soldiers. Elias's training screamed at him to move, to hide, to run. But the girl's hand was still holding on to his arm. More debris fell nearby, and Elias pulled her toward a safer spot behind the wreckage of his ship. He pointed toward the far end of the alley, hoping she would run to safety. But she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on something behind him. A shadow fell across the street. Elias turned and saw a tall figure stepping forward. She wore a long, dark cloak, the edges marked with silver patterns. Beneath the hood, her face was sharp and commanding, Zorathian, like the girl, but older, with eyes that burned like molten gold. 2 guards stood behind her, armed with long rifles. Elias tensed, ready for the worst. His blaster was still at his side, but he knew he couldn't win against 3 armed soldiers. The woman's gaze dropped to the girl, who now ran toward her and clung to her leg. The woman's expression softened for just a moment, only for the girl, then hardened again as she looked at Elias. "You," she said, her voice low but clear. "You protected her." Elias didn't answer. His heart pounded. The soldiers beside her raised their weapons, aiming at his chest. Any second now, they would fire. But instead, the woman raised her hand. The guards froze. She stepped closer, her cloak sweeping the dusty ground. Her golden eyes stayed locked on Elias. "I am General Sarai Devorn," she said slowly, as if testing him. "And this is my daughter." Elias blinked. Her daughter. The one he had just shielded with his own body. In my world, Sarai continued, a life debt is sacred. You saved my child. Your life now belongs to me. Before Elias could speak, she turned to her guards. Take him, unharmed. The guards hesitated but obeyed. One of them stepped forward and took Elias's blaster. Another pulled him toward the shadows at the side of the street. He glanced back at his wrecked fighter, smoke still curling from the twisted metal. His comm was destroyed. No way to call for help. As they moved quickly through side streets, the sound of the battle grew distant. Strange alien towers loomed above, their crystal tips glowing in the stormy light. The air smelled of rain and ozone. Elias realized he wasn't being dragged to a prison. The guards were moving fast, but not roughly. They were protecting him, just as their general had ordered. Why? Because of a single moment. Because he had chosen to save a girl who should have been his enemy. They entered a tall, quiet building. Inside, the walls were covered in shimmering, silver patterns that reflected the light like water. The guards stood aside, and Sarai approached him again. You are not safe here, she said. Not from my people, not from yours. But until my debt is paid, I will not let harm come to you. Elias studied her face. She was serious and powerful. He didn't know what kind of trouble this would bring, but he knew one thing. His war had just become far more complicated than orders and enemies. Outside, the storm raged on. And somewhere above the clouds, two great fleets still fought, unaware that down here, one small act had already begun to change the war. Cliffhanger. The door to the chamber slid open, and a messenger rushed in with urgent words for Sarai. Whatever, he said, made her expression turn cold. She looked at Elias. They know you are here. The messenger's words came fast and sharp in the Zorathian tongue. Elias couldn't understand the language, but he could read faces, and General Sarai's face had turned from calm to stone in a heartbeat. Her golden eyes flicked toward him, measuring, deciding. They know you are here, she said at last, her voice low. The Zorathian Council. Elias straightened. He didn't know much about Zorathian politics, but he did know the word council meant authority and danger. Then I should go, he said. If they catch me here, they will not, Sarai interrupted. You are under my protection, and my word still carries weight. She turned to the guards. Take him to the inner quarters. No one enters without my order. The guards obeyed, leading Elias deeper into the building. They passed long halls lined with alien symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Everything smelled faintly of metal and strange spices. The walls seemed alive, shifting with soft pulses of light. Zorathian architecture was unlike anything he'd seen before. The inner quarters were smaller, warmer, almost human in size. A single bed sat against the wall, with a low table and a window that looked out over the alien city. From here, Elias could see the storm still raging in the skies, lightning cutting the clouds into pieces. The guards left him, locking the door with a silent gesture. Elias sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand through his hair. What had just happened? One moment he was a downed pilot in enemy territory. The next, he was being hidden by the enemy's top general. He looked out the window. Zorath Primes. City stretched far in every direction. Bridges connecting towers, rivers of black water winding between streets, lights glowing like fireflies in the mist. It was beautiful, in a strange way. Beautiful and deadly. The door opened again. Sarai entered alone this time, her cloak removed. Underneath, she wore a silver-blue uniform marked with sharp lines and symbols. It looked both ceremonial and functional, as if she could give orders or fight in it without changing clothes. You saved my daughter, she said simply, as if it was the only explanation needed for what she was doing. In my people's law, A life debt is not something we ignore. Until I return the balance, your life is bound to mine. Elias frowned. And how do you return the balance? Her gaze was steady. By keeping you alive. By ensuring no harm comes to you. Not from my soldiers, not from the war. That's generous, Elias said carefully. But you must know that my fleet will think I've been captured. They already believe that, Sarai said, which is why I've ordered my communications silenced. They will not trace. You hear? Elias studied her. She was calm, confident, and completely sure of her decision. It was strange. He had expected the enemy to see him as a prisoner or a trophy. Instead, she spoke to him as if he were a guest. Still, the danger was real. Why not just let me go? Elias asked. I can find my way back to my people. This doesn't have to cause trouble for you. Her lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. You do not understand. If you leave now, you will be hunted by every patrol in this city. They will find you in less than an hour. And if you are captured by the council, you will not survive the questions they will ask. Elias swallowed. She was right. As much as he hated the idea, staying here might be safer, for now. A knock sounded at the door. One of the guards stepped inside, speaking quickly in Zorathian. Sarai's expression tightened again. They are searching the district, she told Elias. The council's investigators. They will come here soon. Elias stood. Then you have to hide me. Sarai shook her head. No. Hiding will make them more suspicious. Instead, they will see exactly what I want them to see. Before Elias could ask what she meant, she took his arm, not roughly but with a firm grip, and led him through a side passage. The corridors narrowed, twisting into unfamiliar shapes until they emerged into a vast hall lit by soft white light. At the far end stood a wide table surrounded by carved stone chairs. It felt like a meeting place, formal and guarded. Sit, she ordered. Elias obeyed, his mind racing. Moments later, 3 tall Zorathians entered, wearing robes lined with black and red. Their eyes swept the room and fixed on Elias. The air grew heavier. This is the human pilot? One asked in their own language. Sarai answered in the same tongue, her tone like steel. Elias caught only a few words, but the way she spoke, firm, unyielding, told him she was not asking permission. Her voice carried authority, and the other Zorathians listened, even if their faces showed displeasure. At last, one of them turned toward Elias and spoke in broken Terran standard. You are guest? Not prisoner? Elias glanced at Sarai, then back at the speaker. Guest, he said carefully. The word seemed to settle like a stone in the air. The 3 Zorathians exchanged sharp looks, but none challenged Sarai directly. After a tense pause, they left the hall without another word. When the doors closed, Elias exhaled. I take it that went well? For now, Sarai replied. They will not act against me openly, but their patience will not last forever. Elias leaned forward. You're risking a lot for me. Why? Her eyes softened just slightly. Because, in the middle of a war, you chose to save a child who should have been your enemy. Such choices are rare. Before Elias could answer, another rumble shook the building, distant, but strong enough to rattle the lights. Outside, the sky flashed with more explosions. Sarai looked toward the sound. Your fleet is pushing toward the planet's surface. If they come too close, the Council will use you as a shield against them. Elias's mind went cold. If his people knew he was here, they might risk an attack to get him out. But if they believed the Zorathians were holding him, the war could grow worse. Then what happens next? He asked. Sarai met his gaze. For now, you remain here under my watch, and I will decide when it is time for you to leave." As she turned to go, Elias realized something important. She wasn't just protecting him. She was making sure the council couldn't use him. And that meant, whether he liked it or not, they were now on the same side, at least for the moment. Outside, the storm raged on, hiding the movements of ships in the clouds. Inside, the uneasy alliance between human and Zorathian had begun. Cliffhanger. In the silence after she left, Elias approached the window. Across the city on a distant tower, he saw the faint red light of a signal, one used only by the Terran military. His own people were already looking for him. The red signal across the city stayed in Elias's mind long after night fell. It was a Terran military code, a call that meant we know you're here. If his people were already this close, it was only a matter of time before someone made a move. But for now, he was inside the private estate of General Sarai Devorn. The halls were quiet, lit only by soft blue lanterns that seemed to breathe with light. The air carried a faint, sweet smell, like fruit mixed with metal. That night, Elias could not sleep. He kept thinking about the strange twist of fate, how an enemy general had become his protector, and how every choice he made here could change, whether he lived or died. Morning on Zorath Prime began with the deep hum of energy shields powering up around the city. Elias woke to the sound of it, a steady vibration in the walls. The door to his quarters slid open, and a young voice called out, "Come, my mother says you may eat." It was Kayla, the girl he had saved. She stood in the doorway, her golden eyes bright with curiosity. She didn't seem afraid of him anymore. In fact, she looked almost happy. Elias followed her through the halls into a wide dining room. The table was long and low, set with plates of bright-colored fruit, steaming bread, and a pitcher of a dark blue drink that smelled faintly of mint. Sarai was already there, sitting at the far end of the table. Her posture was straight, her hands resting lightly on the surface. She didn't smile, but she nodded for him to sit. "You will remain indoors today," she said. "The council's watchers are still active in the district." Elias sat and took a piece of bread. It was soft, with a taste like sweet corn. Kayla sat beside him, leaning close as if to inspect him. "Is it true your people live on a blue world?" she asked. "Yes," Elias said. "Mostly water, with green land and clouds in the sky." She tilted her head. "Our teachers say humans cannot breathe without machines." Elias almost smiled. "Your teachers are wrong." Kyla looked as if she was storing that information away for later. Sarai watched their conversation without interrupting. It struck Elias that she seemed to be studying him just as much as her daughter was. After the meal, Sarai allowed Kayla to show Elias the estate. They walked through long gardens covered in plants with silver leaves that shimmered under the light. Some grew in floating beds of water, others in carved stone circles. "This is the safe place," Kyla said proudly. "My mother says the city cannot be trusted, but here, no one can hurt us." Elias thought about that. If this was her safe place, then she must know there were dangers even from her own people. As they walked, Kayla asked question after question about Earth, its animals, its seasons, the way humans lived. Elias answered as simply as he could. She seemed fascinated that humans could laugh even in bad times. "Zorathians laugh," she said, "but only when the work is done." By midday, Sarai called Elias to a private study. The room was filled with maps, both of Zorath Prime and of the surrounding star systems. A single large window looked out over the city. "You've seen our world now," she said. "Tell me what you think." Elias chose his words carefully. "It's different, beautiful in its own way, But I can see the war's effect. Even here there's tension. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You are observant. That will keep you alive. She walked to one of the maps and tapped a glowing marker. This is the heart of the Council's power. They do not like that you are here under my protection. They believe you should be used as leverage against your fleet. Elias crossed his arms. And what do you believe? I believe, she said slowly, that if I let them have you, they will push harder for battle. And if your fleet believes you are in danger, they will answer with more fire. Either path leads to more dead. Elias hesitated. You sound like you want the war to end. Sarai looked out the window. Wars end. The question is only how. Much is lost before that happens. There was a pause between them, an unspoken understanding that neither of them fully trusted the other, but both could see the pointlessness of endless fighting. Later that day, Elias explored the outer halls, alone. He kept to the quieter corridors, away from the guards. In one dim corner, he found a half-open door. Inside was a room filled with machinery, tall crystal cylinders linked by glowing cables. Holographic panels floated in the air, showing symbols and diagrams he didn't understand. But one display caught his attention, a map of the system with a pulsing red icon near the Terran fleet's position. Before he could get closer, a voice spoke behind him. You should not be here. Elias turned to see an older Zorathian male in dark engineer's robes. The man's expression was sharp, suspicious. Human or not, this is restricted. I was just looking for a way back to my quarters, Elias lied. The man studied him for a long moment before gesturing to the door. Elias stepped out, his mind racing. That room wasn't just for power systems, it was tracking the fleet. And if the Zorathians had technology like this, they might have more, perhaps even a weapon. That evening, Kayla found him again in the garden. She sat beside him on a stone bench, her legs swinging. Did you get lost today? She asked innocently. Elias glanced at her. Why? Because you went near the engine wing. That's where my mother says important things are kept. Elias didn't answer. Kayla lowered her voice. They are making something there, something that can end the fighting. Mother says it's a shield, but the others, they want to make it into a weapon. The pieces clicked together in Elias's mind. If the Zorathians finished that device and used it as a weapon, the Terrans would have no choice but to escalate the war. That night, as he lay in his quarters, Elias knew he faced a choice. He could keep silent and honor the trust Sarai had given him, or he could find a way to warn his people, risking her life, her daughter's safety, and this fragile protection she had offered. In the distance, thunder rolled again over the city. But this time, Elias wasn't sure if it was the storm or the sound of the war drawing closer. Cliffhanger. Far above the city, hidden in the storm clouds, a Terran strike ship activated its stealth systems and began its descent toward the capital, heading straight for Sarai's estate. The night was heavy with silence, but the air buzzed with danger. Far above Sarai's estate, the hidden Terran strike ship drifted closer, its engines quiet and deadly. Inside, Captain Mira Talon and her team prepared for the mission that could change everything. Back on the ground, Elias stood in the garden, staring at the stars blurred by storm clouds. Kayla sat beside him, her small hand resting on his arm. He had spent the day thinking about what she had told him, the superweapon, the shield that could end the war or become its deadliest tool. Sarai's words echoed in his mind. Wars end. The question is only how much is lost before that happens. Elias knew he had to make a choice. To keep silent would honor Sarai's trust. But silence might mean letting millions die. To warn the Terrans would betray Sarai and put Kayla in grave danger. Suddenly, footsteps approached from the main hall. Sarai appeared, her face set with determination. Elias, she said quietly. You cannot stay hidden forever. They will find you. I know, he replied. But if I leave now, it could bring fire to this city, and to you and your daughter. Sarai shook her head. I am no stranger to danger, but I will protect them as I promised. She looked toward the distant storm, where lightning split the clouds. The council will not wait much longer. If they seize you, the war will only worsen. Kyla tugged at Elias's sleeve. Will you stay? She asked softly. He looked into her golden eyes, filled with hope and fear. For now, he said, but soon. I must decide what to do. Up above, the strike ship slipped silently through the clouds, guided by stealth systems and precise sensors. Captain Mira checked her instruments carefully. There, she whispered, pointing to a cluster of towers below, the heart of the city and Sarai's estate. We get Elias out, she said to her team. No mistakes. The small group of soldiers readied their gear, stun weapons, shields, and a device to disrupt local communications. They knew the risks. The city was tightly guarded, and Sarai's protection made this mission even harder. But orders were clear. Bring Elias home. No matter what, back inside the estate, Sarai convened with her closest advisors. The Terrans will come, she said firmly. We must be ready. Her second-in-command, a tall Zorathian named Kelar, frowned. They will not take the pilot without a fight. No, Sarai agreed, but we will not start the battle. She turned to Elias. You will stay close, and do not trust anyone except me and Kayla. Elias nodded. He felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. That night, Elias sat in the private room beside Kyla. The girl was restless. Tell me about Earth again, she said, her voice soft. Tell me what you want me to remember. He smiled faintly. Earth has oceans, mountains, forests, and people who dream of peace. Kayla listened, eyes wide. Do you think your people will fight forever? Elias sighed. Not forever. But peace is hard to find when fear and anger rule. She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than her years should allow. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The humming of the energy shields around the estate changed. Sarai's voice came over a hidden communicator. They are here. Moments later, the estate's main gates exploded inward. Dark shapes moved fast. Terran soldiers in sleek armor, weapons raised. Elias rose immediately. Kayla clung to his side, eyes wide with terror. Sarai appeared in the doorway, standing tall. Hold your fire, she commanded. The Terran captain stepped forward. Lieutenant Vance, you are to come with us. Elias shook his head. I cannot. Leave. Not like this. The soldiers hesitated, unsure how to respond to Sarai's presence. We will not harm the general, Elias said. But I must stay. Captain Mira narrowed her eyes. You're coming whether you like it or not. Suddenly, one of the soldiers raised a stun weapon toward Sarai. In an instant, Elias stepped in front of her, raising his own weapon, not to shoot, but to warn. Stop, he shouted. There is another way. The soldiers paused, tension thick in the air. Elias looked at Sarai. We have to find a way to end this war, without more bloodshed. The general nodded slowly. Her golden eyes met Elias's, a silent promise passing between them. Outside, alarms blared as Zorathian guards responded to the breach. Fighting erupted in the streets. Inside the estate, Elias negotiated fiercely with the Terran team. He argued that using him as a bargaining chip would only lead to more death. Kayla watched silently, clutching her mother's hand. Captain Mira finally lowered her weapon. Fine, she said. But this is a warning. If we get no word soon, we will return. With force. Elias breathed a quiet sigh of relief. As the Terrans withdrew, Sarai supported Kayla, who was trembling. "Thank you," she said softly to Elias. "You saved more than my daughter today." Elias smiled. "This war, it has to end." Sarai's eyes were hard with resolve. "Then, we must find a way. Together." Cliffhanger. As peace talks seemed possible, shadows moved in the city's corners. The Zorathian council sent assassins to silence Sarai, and Elias found himself caught in their deadly trap. The city lights flickered as dusk fell over Zorath Prime. The streets, once quiet, now hummed with unease. The peace that Elias and Sarai hoped for was fragile. Too fragile. Elias stood near the estate's entrance, looking out over the city. Kayla was close beside him, silent and watchful. Sarai had warned them. The council would not give up easily. They would send shadows to break the fragile truce. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by distant explosions. The walls shook, dust falling from the high ceilings. "Attack!" a guard shouted, rushing into the hall. Sarai appeared, armor shining under the dim lights, her expression fierce. "They have sent assassins," she said. "We must defend this place." Elias nodded. He felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for Sarai, but for Kayla and everyone, under this roof. He was no longer just a prisoner or guest. He was a shield. Outside, masked figures moved like ghosts through the winding streets. Their mission was clear: find Sarai and Elias, and end their threat to the council. The first wave struck without warning, firing stun weapons and cutting through security lines. But Sarai's guards were ready. They fought back fiercely, using energy shields and precise strikes. Elias grabbed a stun baton, feeling the weight in his hand. He was no soldier of the Zorathians, but his training as a Terran pilot had taught him enough. When a shadow lunged toward Sarai from behind, Elias threw himself forward, blocking the attack. The assailant hit the ground with a soft thud, unconscious. Kyla's cry echoed through the hall. "Elias!" He turned just in time to see another attacker aiming a weapon at Kayla. Without hesitation, he pushed her behind a pillar and raised his baton. The fight was chaotic. Lights flickered. The scent of ozone filled the air. Sarai moved through the battle like a storm, her blade flashing as she cut down attackers. Her soldiers formed a protective circle around Elias and Kayla, but the attackers were relentless. More came from the shadows, pressing harder against the defenders. The council wanted to make a statement, and they would not stop until their goal was met. Elias found himself face to face with a tall assassin whose eyes glowed faintly with implanted technology. The man was quick, but Elias was faster. With a swift strike, Elias disabled the attacker's weapon and knocked him out. Breathing heavily, Elias looked around. The battle was turning, but the cost was clear. Several guards lay wounded. Sarai's voice cut through the noise. "Fall back to the inner sanctum. Protect the child at all costs." Elias nodded, grabbing Kayla's hand. They retreated with the others through winding passages. In the inner sanctum, the small group barricaded the heavy doors. The sounds of fighting echoed outside. Elias sat with Kayla, who was trembling but trying to be brave. Sarai leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her eyes met Elias's. "We cannot hold them forever," she said. "We have to find a way out," Elias replied. "We can't let this become a trap." Just then, a sharp knock sounded at the door. A voice whispered, in Zorathian. Sarai opened a small hatch and peered out. "It's a friend," she said. She opened the door slightly, and a messenger slipped inside. The man's eyes were dark and urgent. "The council is sending more forces. They want to capture you alive. And, quickly." Sarai closed the door and turned to Elias. "We must leave now. There is a secret passage beneath the estate." Elias looked at Kayla, who nodded bravely. Together they followed Sarai down narrow stairs that led deep under the city. The secret tunnels were cold and damp. Water dripped from the stone walls. The air smelled of earth and old stone. Elias felt the weight of every step. He could hear distant shouts and the clash of weapons above. They reached a metal door covered with alien markings. Sarai pressed a hidden panel and the door slid open. With a hiss, beyond was a small landing pad. A sleek hovercraft waited silently. Sarai helped Kayla into the craft. Elias climbed in beside her, gripping the controls. The engines hummed to life. The craft lifted smoothly, moving through hidden passages beneath the city. Above them, the city's war continued, but below, the hovercraft sped toward safety. "Where are we going?" Elias asked. "To the neutral zone," Sarai said. "There is a station called Vanguard's Rest, a place where no warships enter without permission." Kyla leaned her head on Elias's shoulder, finally resting. For the first time in days, Elias felt hope, but the peace was short-lived. As they approached Vanguard's Rest, red alarms blared in the cockpit. "Enemy ships incoming," a warning voice announced. Elias gritted his teeth. Sarai's voice was calm but firm. "We may not make it to safety yet." The hovercraft shook as it was hit by a laser blast. Elias struggled to keep control. Suddenly, a group of small fighters appeared, blocking their path. Sarai reached for her sidearm, ready to defend. The craft darted through narrow gaps between asteroids and debris. The chase was fierce. Elias pushed the engines to their limit. Back on the station, officials watched the approaching battle with concern. Terrans and Zorathians both sent ships to intercept the conflict. Elias realized that even here, in the neutral zone, the war's shadow followed. Finally, after a tense chase, the hovercraft slipped past the blockade and landed on the station. Sarai, Elias, and Kayla stepped onto the platform. Greeted by guarded eyes, Sarai's expression was serious. "This is only the beginning," she said. Elias looked at Kayla, then at Sarai. "We have made it this far," he said. "Now we must find a way to end this war, for good."